Hello there and welcome. Hello, everybody. Thanks
Hey,
for coming and joining us on this series that we're doing here. It's the Post-Ignite series. And during Ignite, a lot of people requested more information on Azure SQL DB, on modern application development and these sorts of things. And so we've been invited here today to actually speak to you all. Thank you very much for joining. I've got here Kostja here on the line as well. Hello, Kostja. Hi. And so just very quickly, I'm Charley Hanania, joining from Zurich, Switzerland on this Tuesday, the 14th of December. It's a live event. And we're going to be speaking to you about architecting modern applications using Azure SQL Database. Kostja, my friend, tell us about yourself.
yeah, so good to see you, Charlie, and happy to be here. Actually, it's fantastic to be part of this Post-Ignite series, giving us the opportunity to meet in this community, this data community, right, where we met also being SQL or now data platform MVPs with Microsoft for quite a while, right? So
Yeah.
that's exciting, and it's also cool to have this opportunity of live learning. I am a big fan of lifelong learning, so I hope everybody is engaged and follows along with the module we are going through today. And if you did miss any of the previous parts of the series, then make sure to check those out. And there's one more coming up in 2 days. But today we are talking about Azure SQL Database, and excited to do so.
Yeah, exactly right. So we're both MVPs. Kost is also a regional director for in Germany, right?
Yeah.
And we both run communities both in Switzerland, and you run communities in Germany as well. And basically, we're pretty active in talking to customers, talking to internal teams about architecting systems for Azure. So in this case, our focus is going to be Azure SQL Database. And we're going to talk through a lot of the different options and ideas around it and how you need to start thinking about these things. And we'll even walk through a bit of the setup of your foundational concepts before we move forward as well. So,
Absolutely.
Yep, sorry, go ahead, Kostja.
No. One thing I wanted to mention though is that since this is a live event, right? Make sure to put your questions in, right? Be engaged wherever you are listening or watching, right? Be it YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Learn TV. However, we are here to interact with you, and we have two more friends with us, right, Charlie?
Yes, that's right. So joining us as well, two more experts on the Azure Data Platform. We've got Benjamin Kettner here from Germany, another MVP with us, and Frank Geisler, two colleagues as well who we've worked with and been at conferences with, and who basically support the community as well with us in Germany in this case. So they're going to be answering all your questions. And what you're going to find is that they're joining us for this module. So you've got the opportunity, as always, to ask questions, as Kostja mentioned. But our focus today is mainly on this Learn module. So on the Microsoft platform, there are loads and loads of modules that help you to learn offline. There are lots of reinforcing sort of demos and exercises that you can go through, as well as supporting questions and these sorts of things. So we're going to be going through this module, which is one of the modules in the learning series about Azure SQL Database. And so you can follow along. You'll see Kostja is going to be manning the demos. So he'll be walking through all of these things step by step. But we do encourage you to chat and to let us, to talk to us on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, all the different platforms, and Learn TV as well, so that we can answer questions and so that the moderators can also assist you if you've got any more questions there. So hopefully by the end of this module, you'll be in a stage where you're going to be able to architect and move forward with the series, and actually in the end, develop an application through the series steps themselves.
That's one of the things we want to mention right up front, right? We are doing this module here in this Post-Ignite series, but as being part of a learning path, right? It is also the foundation for a pretty nice setup for a modern application, right? And this is also something we will touch on deeper in the upcoming minutes, right? Where we think about, okay, what does it mean to be a modern application? You have heard about multiple services on the Azure platform, probably. You have also seen that there is this microservices architecture style put in place, and we will touch upon it and make the relationship to how Azure SQL Database is a good foundation still with it. So that said, there's currently no plan to have all the other modules of the learning path in this post-Ignite series, but make sure to follow along maybe the complete learning path and build your own microservices style modern application completely.
Agreed. So building on what Kostja just said, there are two learning objectives that we're going to be focused on today, mainly. Building the foundation for a modern application with using Azure SQL Database as the core concept. Last week, what you'll find was that there was another session called Data Modeling in Cosmos DB, and that was a really, really good topic for you to just get an idea between relational, which we're talking about mainly, well, not really relational, but some parts of relational, and non-relational or NoSQL sort of databases within Cosmos DB. Glenn Colpert and Alex Mann did that last week, and I definitely encourage you to go to look at that as well. But today, two topics. Building a foundation for modern applications using Azure SQL Database. And the second one, just installing, configuring, getting a quick look at some of the capabilities within Azure SQL Database. Okay, so last time, and I'll reiterate one more time, we are live. We can answer your questions. We've got moderators in the background who are helping. And we've got Laurent Bugnon actually in the background as our producer, and Juliet Friedman as well working in the background to basically organize all these things behind. So it's a wonderful opportunity for you to ask your questions, to get them answered by experts. And some of those questions will bubble up when we find that they're relevant to the whole group. And then we can discuss that together as well. So that's mainly the concept that we're trying to put forward here, is that we're having a discussion, we're looking at some of the concepts, while also leading you through the module itself. So yeah, you've got two people here who can answer lots of questions. We're not charging you for it. But it's valuable time, hopefully, for you, and it'll be great for us as well. So what are we looking at today? So the introduction to all this is basically that we're looking at modern applications. All right, lots of different methodologies here. We're talking about cloud services, the IoT concept, basically lots of data coming in, producing mobile apps and using things such as serverless to reduce your costs, and also leveraging something called web APIs to actually amplify and actually augment the applications that you want to work on. So these are what we call now modern apps, using cloud services especially. And through that, basically, we want to make sure that we're combining all of these things together so that you understand what we can get out of it from a platform perspective. What's the scenario? Well, the scenario is catching and missing buses. All right.
Did we catch the bus this morning, Charlie? That is the question, right? I think we made it, right? Because we are here. But yeah, the bus problem. What is it about the bus problem?
Exactly. Not in Switzerland. I mean, come on. In Switzerland, nothing runs late, right? But for everyone else in the world who has to worry about timetables and these sorts of things, everyone's always worried about missing a bus. Whenever I see a jogger basically running down the street, I joke to the kids, the poor guy missed the bus. But, the concepts away with it. Basically, we're looking at how do we leverage some of the components that are out there to try to solve this sort of an issue. So it's actually catching or not catching the bus. The concept here, which was actually in another Learn TV series earlier on, done by Anna Hoffman and David De Maure. Basically, they talked about this scenario, and it's a pretty good one. I also recommend you look at that series as well within Learn TV. And Data Exposed, where basically Davide was complaining that, hey, from where he sits in Redmond, working for Microsoft, he can see the bus. But if he can see the bus, it's already too late. So usually what we end up doing is we try to look at the timetable, understand, okay, the bus is coming at 57 past. So I need to give myself enough time to go and run and meet and catch the bus. But inevitably, you usually miss that bus. So what ends up happening is, well, I'm going to look at my watch. I'm going to try to get the bus, and it leaves, and I end up coming in late to work once again. So how do we fix that? Well, if I see the bus, maybe I can do it. But again, because I misinterpret the time it takes to actually get there, I again find that the bus leaves, and I've missed it, and I'm waiting for another 10 minutes, 15 minutes, sometimes half an hour for the next bus.
And I mean,
makes for an unhappy camper, as they said.
Absolutely. And I mean, how great would it be, right, if you had a little bit more, because we have those personal assistants, right, those virtual personal assistants, but I didn't find any that gives me this capability of like, okay, I can like register my bus route, specifically my typical stops going to work, and then ensuring that I get a notification, an active notification, when
Yep.
I have to leave the office in order to catch the bus or the train and get home in time, right? So I think that is one of the reasons actually why I always thought I would love to do more like train and bus and public transport, but always I will be stuck in the situation where I'm not sure when the next connection will be. So it's not as flexible as using the car, right?
Yeah,
And
agreed.
obviously, I think a solution like this would help me probably do more of a switch here, right?
Great. I mean, as a public transport service, basically, they have a schedule to run. They try to meet those times. They need to account for different things such as traffic and so forth, and they have to leave at a certain time, and they expect it'll take a certain time. They've got information in the background to, that they can analyze to say, oh, maybe we need to extend the bus route by 1 or 2 stops, or extend the period between these 2 stops so that, we know what's going on. But these are all theoretical numbers, right? Theoretical timings, and they don't account for us personally, where I am, if I'm stuck at a traffic light trying to cross the road and whatever it might be, or if I'm 5 stories up in a building and have to go down the stairs, it doesn't actually tailor for me specifically. So yes, exactly right, and that's hopefully what this scenario will help us with, because the idea or the concept that we're trying to work towards in this case is that you've got a device, an application on your phone or whatever it might be, and using that, we can determine, okay, once, given your location and given the bus's location, if it enters a geospatial area, so a location per se, you can have a tag that actually says, hey, it's gone into this boundary. When it enters this space, then I need to start preparing myself to leave, or I need to leave the desk immediately. And that way I've got enough time to go catch the bus and finally make it to work on time.
And this will make not only yourself happy, but also your employer, right? So
Yes,
I think
exactly.
that's a good thing per se. But I think this also shows already, like, okay, if we have that scenario, right, then this is a typical capability of, okay, there will probably be multiple services involved in order to build a solution for this end-to-end scenario. And also, since you want to use it on the go wherever you are, you need to have like multiple platforms and stuff like that. And I think that's pretty cool to have this module as I said, as a starting point for the complete learning path, who is covering all the different pieces that you need to put into play in order to make that happen, right?
Agreed. And it follows sort of the microservices sort of pattern, doesn't it? It's not really a big bang type of application where you need to get integrated with everything else within your organization. You can actually run this off a small number of services and basically get it up and running pretty quickly. So let's take a look at some of the concepts behind architecting something like this, and try to understand which direction do we take, right? So the concept or the components that Kostja was alluding to in this case are 3 main ones here. First, you need a website, okay, or some area where you can monitor the bus locations, or some API or whatever it might be where you can get the information. You want to get notifications, okay, to your device or whatever it might be. It could be an email, it could be an SMS as well. And you want to be able to, for what you're doing, for when you're developing, you want to be able to automate the deployment and make it scale in case you find that this goes so well that all of your colleagues are also using it, and because it's running so slowly, you actually end up missing your bus again. So
one thing here, Charlie, if you allow, because I see that we also have a question, and that's good, right? We wanted to have questions. Yes, we really want to encourage all of you to keep questions coming and shoot them at us. So we had a question here from Eric, who asked who said that he's in the process of splitting up a monolithic application into smaller pieces as we were explaining, right, this approach towards like more microservices based architecture where you have different elements and pieces, and I think one of the question, or his question then was, if we have any ideas or recommendations when it comes down to basically splitting a huge database and eventually using things like Elastic Pool or stuff. Not going too deep into it, Charlie, but
Yeah.
what is your take on those different types of database services that we have on the Azure platform, and what you would do in order to like tackle this modernization approach for a monolithic application legacy style, right?
Yeah, so it's a really good question from Johansson. Then thank you very much for that. Yeah, it's the common question that we get every time. But the idea is what? There are different approaches. If you're running within an enterprise and you've got shared data sets that are happening between databases, if it's what we call a complex database system or database application, then you go towards Azure SQL Managed Instance, because you can have the databases together. You can run very similarly to how you run on premises. Especially if you're sharing data sets between databases. If you're running consistent workloads and you're trying to break them up, as you said here, as microservices, then yeah, start using Azure SQL DB. Keep in mind that you won't be sharing data with cross database queries and things like that, but they're singleton databases that might be shared that might be exposed to each other, interfacing on an API level further up, right? But then Elastic Pools make sense if you know that you have consistent workloads happening throughout, and you want to be able to cater for the peaks and troughs, but all working together. What we're going to be working on today is something else called serverless. So I won't expose all of that right now, but we're going to be talking about that a bit further on. And serverless is great when you have workloads that are peaking and then aren't being run for a while. So in this case, you want to use it when you want to go to work in the morning and when you want to leave work in the evening. So
depending on that, I think that is also something that would have been part of my answer, is right, especially because we already pointed to this fantastic session of our two friends Alex and Len on Cosmos, right? I think there's these different options, and if you are going to tackle a project like this anyway, right, then I would really recommend to also look into the aspects of, okay, what is the specifics of those different databases, those different data loads, the end-to-end business scenarios that you want to cover or leverage, and then how probably you can combine those, right? I think one of the aspects here is that we really want to make the point today that Azure SQL Database, even though it's basically the platform service brother or sister of like the box product, like this SQL Server product Microsoft has had for a long time, right? It is still very much capable to be a core element of a modern infrastructure setup or modern application infrastructure setup, right? But there's other options as well. And in this NoSQL hype world, where probably people believe that if you go modern, you need to go NoSQL, they probably don't get that NoSQL. And I think Alex pointed that out as well, that NoSQL really means not only SQL, right? So, which to me often comes to the point that in a complete architecture, for more complex scenarios, as you said, Charlie, right, you will probably not only have like this one database or not only this one database type. You might want to have different database types for the specifics, and also to leverage their core benefits and capabilities.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's what I speak to customers about all the time. Understanding what the core benefits are is integral to all your decision making. And I come from an engineering background when we're talking about enterprises and these sorts of things. But when we're talking even to small customers, we're always talking about, please don't just pick it up and start using it. Engineer your platform so you know what you can use out of the different PaaS type services, so that NoSQL doesn't become the default if it's just got some JSON in it or whatever it might be, or if you want to use Graph, but you actually consider, okay, this is great for this type of workload. Azure SQL Database is great for this type of workload. Does my organization need Azure SQL? Does it need Synapse Analytics? Does it need this? Does it need that? Not just take the brand and say, okay, I've got a large database, so then obviously I'm going to need Synapse. Or I've got a small database that isn't going to be connecting to anything, so obviously I have to use serverless. Understand a bit more of what the concepts are, and we do that usually through engineering by seeing what the strengths and weaknesses are of each of the products, or basically the strengths, not only the weaknesses, to say, okay, this is what this tailors for, this is what it caters to. So if I have a workflow or a decision tree, I'm going to be using this in this way, but at the same time, understanding the reliability requirements, the security requirements, and to make sure that I'm not actually opening any doors or leaving myself or my organization exposed by using one of these different things. So if we get those concepts from the ground up, then everything becomes much easier, because then your decision-making path just flows, and you can say, oh yeah, that one, go down there, and here's some information on the wiki to actually help you go there, and some code samples and these sorts of things which apply to whatever standards and things we need to put forward in the organization.
Perfect. Getting back to the bus, right? Where do we get the bus data from?
Very good. So a lot of cities, as it says here, a lot of cities have public transformation data. So because they've seen that a lot of people are trying to catch this bus, and a lot of technically minded folks like yourselves on the call. So what is this? What's this format that we can see here, Kostja?
Yeah, I think that is this GTFS, transit feed specification, right? So it's basically a JSON format, right? Which gives us some specifics about the route, the vehicles on the route, the next stop, and whether they are at the stop or in transit to the next stop. So this basically helps us really position the different buses on a concrete geolocation, right? So, and as you said, this data is available for many different public transport organizations and cities around the globe. So the one we are using here, obviously, that's kind of related to Microsoft, right? It will be for the Seattle or Redmond area, but I think it's pretty interesting how many of those data sets and data streams and public data streams are already available, and people often forget about it or don't know about it, right? So it's interesting to see what types of applications you can build with data streams that are ready for you to consume, available in standard formats as we have here, right? And I think that's something you also should definitely check out if you have scenarios where you think, well, there should be an organization or something which has the data, and probably as a public organization that might have an interest to put that data out. Go search for it, and you will probably be astonished how much of these data sets, those data streams, are available, ready to consume.
Agreed. Now, this data set in and of itself, is it structured, unstructured, semi-structured? What are we talking about? I guess it's semi-structured, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, it is in a sense, so that we have like we still have more or less like the definition of this structure, right? This the elements and the schema somehow, right? It is not so much in a form that is it's not like a classical table or something we have readily in our mind and concept if we think about a relational database. But
Agreed.
that is also already pointing towards one of the points we want to make today, is that Azure SQL Database and SQL Server as well, right, are absolutely capable of handling JSON data. And not only that, but we will touch upon those aspects in the continued slides.
So a lot of people will shy away saying, relational versus non-relational, or NoSQL, or all that hype that's around there, saying, well, if it's got JSON, then I have to go Cosmos DB, because obviously a relational database can't handle it. But SQL Server does have many ways to actually slice and dice this, and basically give you still the flexibility to say, well, I'm not going to be providing the vehicle data, but I do want to have the position data, for example. Or I'm not going to have position data, but I still want to augment it with the vehicle ID and the trip ID and these sorts of things. as well.
And
So
you
we
will
can
see,
use that data.
yeah, and you will see in the live demo then also, I mean, as we only have like this 1.5 hours, right? We will not be able to go too deep into all of the details here, right? But especially talking about the geospatial data, that is also something that we are going to handle, and that also Azure SQL Database can help us with greatly, because it has the capability to use the information in this JSON in order to transform it into geospatial information in the database, and it's built in, so there's a data type for it that we can use, and that's also a great thing to have, right?
Looking forward to the next steps. It should be really good. So this is one portion that fits within the whole concept of it. And if we're looking at the whole solution, if you go through the whole series, if you go through the learning path itself, you take a look and see about all of these different components, and you actually build a working solution focused with logic apps and GitHub Actions, which we're going to be focused on today, and also looking at getting some other information about understanding the routes and maybe augmenting that through other services later. But in this classic sort of idea or concept of Agile, all you need is to start with one thing and you just start building out. So right now, or today, we're going to be looking more about the foundations, which will then really help you move through the series as we go forward. Do you have any comments on this stuff?
Yeah, two things on this slide, actually. Number one is, and it says on the slide, this is like a possible architecture, right? And I think that's also what you mean when saying like this agile style and so on, right? It's not that we want to convince you that this is like the only possible solution for this scenario, or that this is the exact architecture that you need to build tackling a scenario like this, right? It's more like, okay, if we have those components, then there's interesting pieces, and that is the second thing I wanted to mention here, right? We mainly focus on setting up the foundation, as we have said, setting up Azure SQL, which is a central component on this slide. And if you look deeper, then there's two more things to mention. One is, oftentimes you will have this loop, and you have to gain an understanding for this end-to-end flow of data, right? You have the moving pieces with the buses. They produce data that you will collect, in this case, through an IoT device or IoT hub, but independent from what it is exactly, right? Data is flowing into your system. In this case, it's JSON data. You will then use something in order to transform it, or you will probably in a next module with an Azure function try to analyze the incoming data stream in order to build your logic app and then send the notification via email or any other channel, right, in order to inform someone who has registered to be following the route. But then if you look deeper down, you can get the route reference data. We will import that into the database. That is actually something that we will do today. And then you have this well-known text format for the geolocation information, which we then can also use, and you will see that later today also, how to put it really into
The context,
into the context of the real world, right? So what is the position really on the globe, and what we can do out of it? And last, and you mentioned that as well, with GitHub Actions, or the question, okay, if we build a complex system like this with various pieces, right? And then I think this practice of always going CI/CD and building a pipeline in order to deploy a system is also a key instrument that you should leverage to ensure that you can handle all of those multiple pieces and really still be rock solid when it comes to deployment time. That you ensure that you have good quality and good deployment pipeline in order to push out changes, and that you can really live this agile style where you want to add pieces, where you probably want to do changes and really understand the impact of those changes through the complete chain of technology, right?
As a DBA, I'm always living in constant fear of application developers pushing changes out that are going to break something, and that we have to roll back or something like that in terms of the data, and then have to find the gap and try to adapt to that change. But in the modern practices, it's basically getting better and better. So the hope is that you're building an architecture, or that we're building an architecture that you can actually have deployments happening during the day, while your systems are operational, with reduced impact, because you're going to have leveraged GitHub and all the other DevOps capabilities to do the testing in the background, to limit the exposure, and to basically help your organization move forward agilely and actually cater to all of these changes that's happening around. But given that it's JSON here, it gives a lot of flexibility to the developer, right? And generally the expectation is, hey, if you're giving application developers flexibility here with these key value pairs that's in a semi-structured format, then the DBA or the application developer or the database developer themselves are going to be really limited and restricted. But not really, because as the next slide shows us here, there are, if I click on the right area, so Azure SQL Database is actually built with a lot of these things in it. And also, as you said before, because historically, SQL Server has had a lot of these things built into it. So we've already got security concepts that are built in SQL servers. I think the safest and most secure database in the world, with all of these certifications that are happening, especially in Azure now as well. The developer experience, as you mentioned, with all of the actions and the GitHub and all that, all the capabilities around Agile, that's all there now too. It's versionless, so there's no concept anymore of worrying about upgrades. We've got a couple of customers now where we're still upgrading from 2008. So it's this doesn't become an issue anymore, because Microsoft then takes care of what happens in the background to make sure that it can remain versionless, and that you get all of the new capabilities as they come out within the different products. And we know it, right? So a lot of these things we're going to be talking on later on in the slides. But the concept is that SQL Server doesn't need to be thrown out the window, or Azure SQL doesn't need to be thrown out the window because we're talking JSON or because we're talking about geospatial. It's all capable there as well, right?
One of the things that I really want to emphasize is there is a great history of supporting developers building exciting solutions on top of this product, right? On top of SQL Server, basically, right? And Azure SQL is like SQL Server in a specific form, right? So,
Yep.
I mentioned this because, I mean, we have been in this space. We have met, like, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, probably through the MVP program and interaction with Microsoft data community. And what I have always felt is that there's a specific emphasis on and investment into understanding what developers need in order to use SQL Server or Azure SQL nowadays as a fundamental element in their end-to-end solutions, and enabling the developers with tooling, with the right set of also guidance available, how to implement specific things, optimize. And I think that all that is still there, right? I mean, even though and we will see Azure Data Studio today, which is kind of the new kid on the block when it comes to tooling, but this is also just an additional tool and an additional iteration on all the great investments that we have seen previously in SQL Server Management Studio or SSDT within Visual Studio, right? So there have been several iterations and always great support for the developer community, the data developer community, right? And I think that is something that you can count on, and you will also see for Azure SQL Database.
Great. We do have a question actually in the background, so let's touch on it now, because I don't think we've got a complete answer, because it seems that it's very specific to a scenario here. We have Sharafuddin from YouTube asking, how do I make a database to its maximum limit of SQL in the database size, and then create a new database once it reaches the limit without downtime.
I think that is asking for automation or scalability, right? If you look at the various options that you have, one thing that we will use today is like this serverless tier, right? Where you can have a configuration of like the maximum capacity and the minimum capacity that you want to have for your database. But if you look at when it comes to Azure SQL, the classical tier, then also you already had the option to scale, right? So basically, not the exact need to spin up a new database and migrate your data, but depending on what is really the thing you want to achieve, automation, either for scaling or automation in order to migrate data into like a new database and then switch at a specific point in time. I think that that's absolutely doable. Again, maybe some details are missing from the exact scenario,
Yeah.
but I think
But
that's
yeah,
the
there's
way
so
I
many
would go.
scenarios around it, aren't there? I mean, if you're hitting space limits, then maybe you're not looking at compression in the right sort of way within the database, or you're not looking at the right platform. So are you looking at putting too much data without any archiving? Are there capabilities around there? Are you too closely connected in terms of your application to your database, or have you got other structures in between, like store procedures and functions, which help to mask some of that so that you can actually push some of the data out, maybe even using data lake for some of those structures? Or should you be looking at using hyperscale from the get-go so that you can actually grow without any limitations from that perspective? But there are so many different options around it, but they do need coordination. They do need some pre-thought beforehand so that you know the concepts that you're trying to cater towards as you're going forward. But let's move forward because I really want to see some of the demos. So let's see how we go from here. So where are we going? We are going more towards building the service using Azure Functions and sending notifications using Logic Apps, right? But we're not going to hit a lot of those right now. We're just really setting the foundation, correct?
Absolutely, yeah, correct. I mean that's also the reason why I think we can go over this slide and the next one pretty quickly, because that is the outlook, right? That is what you will do in the next steps of the learning path when you go into functions and logic apps, the Azure Static Web App component, in order to have the website ready for this scenario. We will see a little bit of automation of the deployment with GitHub Actions, especially for the database component, right, that we have today. But the core focus now really is to create the foundation, right? So what do we need to do in order to achieve that? And I think we have already had a few talking points here to basically before we get to the first exercise and the first live demo experience from the module itself. Maybe we want to go to the first knowledge check, and we encourage you to put in the answer in chat. So, Charlie, do we have a question for the audience?
We do. So let's talk through it together. Good idea. So yeah, ask the question and let's see how we go.
Which database service will be used to store, process, and serve the real-time bus data? I think it should be more or less like a no-brainer, even though there's an interesting option here, I think, on the slide. So what do you think, Charlie? Should it be A, B, C, or D? And what about managed instance here in the list?
Good question. So Azure Functions, well, we're talking about a database service tier, so it's definitely not going to be an Azure function, correct?
Correct.
You agree? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Please, by the way, answer the questions in the live feed, and hopefully we can see what sort of percentages we get of people answering it correctly and not right, so that we know whether or not we need to reiterate or skip maybe even the next slide or questions to see how it goes. Azure SQL Managed Instance. Well, we said it was a microservice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that work for what we're doing? Is it microservice focused?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point, right? Option C and D here. So SQL Server per se is also not saying it's not capable of being central for
possible.
a modern application, but it's also like we wanted to have scalability. We don't know how attractive our solution will be, right? So probably we want to have some capabilities, and especially the agile microservices component. So having something serverless, having a platform service, not handling or taking care of too much of administration of the database tier itself, right? Or even infrastructure when it comes to pure SQL Server deployment. I think all of that points to B. So what do you think?
Let's have a look. Very good.
Perfect.
So I wonder how many people answered B, hopefully a lot. But yeah, Azure SQL Database has a different number of tiers, and they really do cater well for what we're trying to build here as a microservice.
Okay, do we want to switch to the demo now? And
I think we should.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So we can, if we've got time at the end, we can go through the second and third questions that we've got. But let's see how it goes, Kostja. Talk us through the exercise that we're going through now.
Yeah, I mean, the first exercise is pretty straightforward, because this is also only like setting up your tooling and stuff. I want to mention though, what you see right now is like the module itself. As we said, it's part of this learning path, right, where you build serverless full stack applications in Azure, right? So, and the first module is what we are covering today. This gives you all the elements, like also the exercises that we will see in a bit. This one is the first exercise. We will then have the deployment itself, and hopefully get to the GitHub actions towards the end. So if you look at this exercise, right, then this is basically telling you to download the specific tools that you need. One of them is Visual Studio Code. So I have the download page here, right? You will find it for your specific platform, and make sure to then use the correct version for your platform and architecture, and install Visual Studio Code as tool number one that we need. Tool number
we
two.
did this earlier, right? So we've gone through this earlier so that we don't waste time on the call on the screen here. But feel free to go through and to
No, exactly. I mean, I have installed Visual Studio Code already. I have also installed this tool right here, which is Azure Data Studio, and you'll find the download here, right? This is also linked, and you'll find the latest version with the installers for the various platforms. So you can install that onto your machine as well. And then you should have both tools installed. So if you look at the...
It's true.
So if you look at the tools then, so I open up Visual Studio Code, then make also sure to check out some of the extensions that you would probably add to your development environment and experience. So if you look at what I have installed when it comes to extensions, then something like the Azure account, right, which helps you with sign-in and subscription management extension, activities here in directly from Visual Studio Code. We also have later on the need for Azure Functions probably, and if I scroll down a little, then you see that I have also SQL Server development experience add-on installed, and some extension for SQL database projects, right? So there's a list of extensions within the module that you should check out installing or adding to your Visual Studio Code environment. So now you have installed both these tools. Next thing you need to have is a GitHub account, right? So, and because there is a link to a repo, a GitHub repo, which is this one, and we already mentioned the name, Davide Mori, a SQL program manager now with Microsoft, is also a former MVP. We have a long-standing friendship here, and Davide and I, we often had exactly this discussion, right? How to ensure that people understand Azure SQL Database or SQL Server is still pretty much a good solution for modern applications. So I'm pretty excited that this manifested somehow in this exact scenario and full stack solution that you can follow along, as we said, through the learning path, right?
Yeah, he's got a lot of samples in there that help application developers actually try different things out and really understand the strengths within the SQL Server product or the Azure SQL product space. So really, really worthwhile taking a copy of that link and going through and taking a look at it as well.
And it's also like the foundation for what we build upon today. So I'm going to fork this into my personal GitHub area so that I have now a fork here sitting in my repo, or sorry, I have now my repo of it, right? And I will use also this clone URL here, which helps me to now connect it in Visual Studio, right? So if I go to source control here, and then I say, okay, clone repository, then I can clone it from GitHub just by putting it here, which then will basically download the code to a local folder I can use. Let's put it somewhere in demos and full stack.
Does that mean that if I make any changes now, it's going to get changed for everybody in GitHub?
No, that's why I forked it, so that I have my copy, my individual copy that I can work towards, right? I can also afterwards delete it, and obviously all of the work of Davide will still be maintained, right?
Okay.
And
I'm
now
not overwriting Davide's code. That's good news.
No, absolutely not, right? And so now I created this area. I have the code here, right? So I will also open it directly in Visual Studio Code. So we see the complete solution opened here.
Nice.
And last step basically in this first exercise is that we also want to open this folder in Azure Data Studio, because the next activities in the next exercise we are coming to in a few minutes or a little bit later, right, is then everything in Azure Data Studio. So once you open up Azure Data Studio, this is what you see. And the connection area, for example, is pretty familiar, or should look pretty familiar if you have worked with other data developer tooling before, right? It's like your Server Explorer, where you can add servers and database connections. But we also have like this Explorer view where we can open up a folder. And I will just use the same folder and open it. So demos, full stack apps code, right? This folder is containing the code. And now I will also in Azure Data Studio have my Explorer view with all the different slides and files and everything I need in order to do my development, right? So specifically, we will in the next step then look into this database area where we find some data notebooks, SQL notebooks, which is also an interesting, I would say still pretty new capability, right? But also a great way to learn and document basically different steps throughout a process. That said, I think I would quickly hand off back to you, Charlie, and the slides.
Great. No, I mean, what you said was great. I mean, using Azure SQL Data Studio or Azure Data Studio is something that's new and sometimes quite scary for database professionals, but it has a very familiar, in some ways, familiar look and feel. It doesn't have the same things as SSMS, you're right. But the capabilities with notebooks in there and all of the components that you can actually add in, as you mentioned, really make it the next way forward. And the other really good thing is it's got multi-factor authentication built in, so that if you're trying to secure the data that is or your resources that are in Azure, because that's another thing that people are generally concerned of, you can actually do that within Data Studio. Unfortunately, not so much with Management Studio without using multi-factor authentication. But it certainly has a lot of strengths, and I look forward to the next part where you're going to be showcasing some of that stuff as well. So that's what we've been talking about, configuring the development environment. And that's going to be the foundational step for what we're doing next. And right now, we're going to talk again about SQL Server and just really talk very quickly around some of those aspects, because we are sort of going in. We've got 40 minutes left, and we'll see how it goes. So we mentioned before a lot of these facets within the Azure SQL product. Okay, it's got security built in, it's versionless, so you don't have to worry anymore about upgrades and these sorts of things. You can apply the current skills because pretty much it's got pretty much everything that was in the box product or on-premises product. and it continues to go down that path where it's getting more and more parity with what was on premises, with then the augmented capabilities that are cloud focused. You can do HTAP, sort of hybrid analytical processing within there too. So you can cater for your transactional workloads using in-memory LTP. And now also with column store, you've got the geospatial capabilities and these sorts of things in there as well. And it's got a great developer experience like Kostja, sorry, just mentioned to you guys. Sorry, Kostja. I was reading it off your tag.
All good. I know this is confusing. By the way, if you want to chat to us later, right? If we can answer all questions today, or you want to reach out, make sure to find us on Twitter, for example, right? So, and that's why I have my Kostja everywhere. All my friends typically call me Kostja, right? In my passport, it says different. So make sure to check out at Kostja Klein on Twitter, as well as at Charley Hanania on Twitter as well, right? We will be there and happy to connect. Also reach out with additional questions after the show if you want to, right?
Yeah, we're always here, always happy to help. So part of this also, the main focus of what we're talking about today actually is this multi-model capability. So the capability of using JSON, there's also Graph, which usually people would say goes directly to use Gremlin within the Cosmos DB capabilities there with the Gremlin API. And the capability of having key value pairs in a buffer, basically capability with in-memory LTP. And for a very long time, it's been using XML, right? So we've had all of that. And then the capabilities now within Azure of having the capability of having serverless and hyperscale. So all of these things together are using the same features and capabilities in the back end. So they've just been prepared to be platform as a service. That's the whole idea, using the Azure backbone and also the feature backbone that come within SQL Server.
I would be pretty amazed if people would let us know in the chat also when they noticed, or if they even noticed up to now, that we have this notion of beyond relational in SQL Server or as a SQL database, right? Because we were chatting, right, Charlie, yesterday, and I said, look, this beyond relational topic, it really was like a claim that we had a few years back, and it would be interesting to see if people really did know about those beyond relational capabilities that are core and built in to the SQL Server relational engine. Like it's like still the relational product, but it has the beyond relational capabilities, and they have been for quite a while. Readily available, as we said, to handle JSON, XML, and then also these capabilities of additional data types, for example, for geospatial data, right?
Yeah, it's been in there for quite a while, which has been great. Being able to use geometry and geography data types to actually go through and see where you are relative to an object, either in a room or one object to another within a room, for example, or something that's outside in the real world.
So let's try to get there. And head on.
Exactly. We're very chatty today, which is great, but we'll see how it goes. So one of the questions that we had before was about scale, right? So in this case, the capability of scale is there by having hyperscale or serverless, for example, catering for the smallest of workloads to the largest of workloads. Pretty near seamlessly, right?
Yeah.
So that's built into the product. Future proofing. So a lot of the time we're having to sit down with a lot of clients talking about, hey, this feature that you're using pretty heavily, it's not going to be there for a while. Look, this capability is in the new version, but we need to upgrade you so you can start using it. And worrying about compatibility levels and these sorts of things as well. But in this case, because Microsoft generally caters towards this capability of still supporting deprecated features or features that are in use, and they have all the analytics around who's using what, which is great. Not having access to your data, but knowing which features are being used, means that you can actually seamlessly develop new versions within the same database code, within the database framework as well. And this part here, Kostja, I think you've already discussed it, right? Within the DevOps workflows?
I think it's a key element for me, right? I mean, and that is also true for all the other data options that you have on the Azure platform. Or generally speaking, I think DevOps as it says on the slide, is more or less ubiquitous now, right? So
Mhm.
I think it's important that whatever you build, you understand that you properly support and establish the CI/CD pipeline right from the beginning.
Yep.
Because the more components, the more building blocks you add to your overall architecture, right, the more complex the system will get, and the more you will earn the benefit having that in place right from the beginning. Right?
It's a great habit to establish, most definitely, even for DBAs, to tell you the truth. A lot of the time we're working off shared repositories, and basically working together where people aren't having to search for where is this script gone, or how come it doesn't work anymore, or is there an update to it, and having different copies all over the place with dates behind it. This is a great way for DBAs and database teams also to work together. The next part here is this whole JSON support, right? So it's very easy to assign and declare a variable and use it with JSON, and to tear it apart and to bring it back together and process it, right? And to insert it into a table and also read it from a table and put it back into JSON.
Yeah, we will see that in the demo also, right? So I think we don't need to go deep here, but if you want to take another thing away from the session today, then there is JSON processing capabilities right within the service, right? Right. And this example gives you an idea, right? You can have JSON data coming in. You can select from it. You can you can basically split it in order to store it if you want to, also in a relational table. And you can also do the other way around. If you have relational data in a classical table sitting in your SQL Server database, then you will be able to provide it out to the outside world as a JSON representation. So for others, probably especially on the web side of things, for easier consumption, right?
Agreed. So you can take the payload, you can query it, you can insert it into a stored procedure, you can update it, you can update an attribute or just something within an element within the JSON payload. It's really flexible, and it's great basically that we can do that within here. So a lot of flexibility in there as well. The other thing that we're focusing on today is the geospatial capability.
Yeah, and as we said, it's right in the engine, right? So this is also just a very quick example, and we will see more in just a bit in the next exercise. But what you see here is that we also can declare a variable as geography. So that is the data type, really, a built-in data type. And oftentimes in the past, I've been asked, right, what is this based on? Because it's based on the CLR runtime. And so basically you can also create your own data types. But even in a scenario where your DBAs or your policies will not allow you to do so, since these are built in, they will be available for you, right?
And they're standard, right?
Sorry?
So it's running using the OGC standard, which is global. So
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about what the platform you're trying to take this to, or whether it's going to work in different regions and this sort of thing. It's global.
It's there, right? And that's the cool thing about it, because this will help you really work with the data. And for our question, when is a bus entering a specific area, right, a region, this is a core capability that we are going to use, right?
Great. So let's do that. Let's basically go to the next step, which is setting up your Azure SQL DB.
Mm-hmm. So getting back to my screen and basically going back to the module and skipping over to the next exercise, what you will see is that I am using a sandbox, right? That is a core thing that you should be aware of, and a really cool thing of the Learn platform is that you have those sandboxes available. They will basically provision an environment for you, and you see that I have 2 hours and 27 minutes left on my sandbox, and I can have 8 more sandboxes today. So 8 times 4 hours, or even if it was just 2 hours, because I think sometimes they will not be 4 hours, but just 2 hours, right? But if you think about it, that is quite a lot of time where you have an Azure environment readily available for you to use, and then already connected with the Cloud Shell to do a few things. Because the step of deploying the database and doing the initial setup I did this first part already.
Yeah, we don't want you to have to wait for it, right?
Yeah, because that would have probably taken a little bit too long and would have been too boring. I mean, you will find the code here, and the few things that I would like to mention is that if you look at the code here, then typically it will go ahead and provision it in a specific location, which is the location of the resource group. I did not do that because I found a few capacity limitations at the moment, but basically the complete code, that's what I'm saying, is available for you, right? And so you can probably poke a little bit around with it and do changes. So you can change the location you want to deploy to. You can choose a different name for your resources, everything. But in the end, what you will
your
have,
own tenant too. It doesn't have to be in the
absolutely. I mean,
sandbox.
if you have an Azure subscription readily available, you can also deploy there, right? You basically using the same scripts. What it will give you though is, and if you are using the concierge subscription, which is the sandbox environment, then you will have this resource group, which will be used to deploy to. And now you can see that this resource group, for example, in my case, is Invest US. My resources are Invest Europe still, right? So I changed a little bit in script in order to make that happen. Nothing for you to worry about, just saying, okay, you have this opportunity, right? You can play with it, you can really dig into it, understand how the resources are deployed. And what you will get in the end is you will get this server representation, something you will always have. And just also to mention it briefly, if you look at the firewall settings here, right, then if you follow along the module, your client IP should be added here already. This is needed for you to access the database in a bit from from Azure Data Studio, right? If it is not added already, then you can always add your current client IP to the firewall allow list through this button here. This is a very important thing to know, because this often is the reason for connection errors, right? So if you can't connect to your Azure SQL database, then make sure that your correct client IP address is allowed for from a firewall perspective, right?
Also quite important from that screen that you're on just then are two other options there. So one of them was the TLS version. So set that to 1.2 whenever you can. That basically allows you to have encryption over the wire as you're connecting to the database. And that third option there, which is allows Azure services and resources to access this server. In general, that should be set to off or no, and then explicitly specifying which applications and which IP addresses or services you want to be able to access this the SQL Server resource. Otherwise, you're basically leaving yourself open to anyone trying to access the data. But of course, you're going to have a username and password, or have it authenticating it directly with your Active Directory accounts. But it's just one of those things you want to put in place to make sure that you're not exposed in any way from a security perspective.
Yeah, for this last option, I typically define it as depending on your level of paranoia, right? Obviously, in a zero trust world, you are absolutely right. Probably you should set it to no, just to ensure that everybody understands this still only allows other Azure services access to your environment, right? So specifically for this learning path, right? And if you don't want to struggle with understanding all the different options you could have using, I don't know, private endpoints or specific allow lists for the different services that you are going to use, you should probably keep it to yes, making sure that the other services, like, for example, functions or IoT Hub, Event Hub, whatsoever, is able to connect to your SQL database. But absolutely right, and good to point that out, right?
Agreed. Fit for purpose and fit for use. It's a sandbox where it'll be torn down after 2 hours or 2.5 hours in this case. So there's little risk. You're not going to be putting your personal data in there, for example. But in general, when we're talking about operational design, try to cater for these things again from the ground up so that you're not exposing yourself unnecessarily. A lot of the time, Azure gets a bad rap on a lot of these things because people think that it's exposed out to the internet and these sorts of things, but a lot of these foundational or fundamental things can actually be pushed down using policies, and just making sure that the right people are connecting or the right services are connecting to your data.
With the same script, you are also deploying then the first database into this server, right? So, and this is a general purpose serverless tier Gen 5 with 4 vCores and an auto pause delay of 1 hour, right? This is some settings that you can set in your compute and storage. And that goes back to what we said earlier, right? And this is the serverless way of Azure SQL DB. So making it possible for basically the service to understand the needs and scale up, scale down seamlessly, and then also do the auto pause. If you have auto pause enabled, obviously the first hit to your database after an auto pause will probably be not as performant, but this is also supporting our requirement of we are still building up this solution, right? We don't know the exact usage. We don't know how attractive we can make it for travelers to use our bus service, bus catching service, right? So, and the application. So I think it's a good idea, and it shows some of the great capabilities when it comes to auto scaling this.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Now it caters for a perfect workload like this. So again, fit for purpose. But yeah, catering to what you said, sometimes it's going to have a startup time. If it's already been paused, it's going to need maybe 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds to actually spin itself back up. So I wouldn't use it for trading applications, for example, unless you've warmed it up or basically brought it up beforehand. And it'll take an hour afterwards to actually spin back down. But the great capability there is that you can have it up to 40 vCores. So if you've got an intense workload and maybe some ETL or some stuff that you're trying to do in the background, and you're still using relational capabilities within there, in stored procs and whatnot, then this actually does still work for that sort of scenario where you want to actually scale up to a very high number, and also down to what you've got there highlighted, the minimum capacity of 0.5 vCores. So it will actually adjust itself to the workload you're running.
And that's exactly what I wanted, or last thing I wanted to mention before we jump into Data Studio, right, is you find the code here, right, and you can play around in the same way. This is the definition where you build up the SQL database, where you have the vCores, the minimum capacity and stuff, right, and the compute model set to serverless. This is where you can also change those values, right? Now we are going to connect with Azure SQL to that environment. And in order to do that, I will already copy my server name right here, go into Data Studio, and then make a connection to this server, use SQL login today, and I have prepared my username and also my password. Oops.
Feel free to try to connect everyone for the next couple of minutes.
Don't bring this server down, please.
Don't bring it down.
And we will have a little bit more fun if the demo works, actually, right? So we are connecting to it. I think I should have basically probably selected the database. Maybe cancel it and select the database.
It could be waking up.
Maybe.
So while it's actually loading that, can you click on the authentication type so that we can take a look at under SQL login? You've got the other capabilities there. So Windows authentication and also Azure Active Directory with MFA.
Yeah.
That was the feature that I was talking about when we were talking about whether or not to use this or SSMS. Yeah, this has built-in MFA.
Yeah, this is taking.
Is it actually up and running? Can we check on the Azure portal?
It is, right. There's the database.
Go into the query editor maybe. Let's see if it's actually on the left. Yeah, cool. Again, it's waking up probably from being paused since we prepared the instance earlier, or the database earlier.
Yeah, but even that should now
should have worked by now.
Should now come up a little bit quicker, right? So
it's having the same issue on the in the portal. Okay, so let's talk through what we were going to do in this case then.
Yeah,
still connect.
Exactly. I think we will cancel this, and then unfortunately we probably have to look at. And if you go back to the slides later, then I will try to catch up with it. What I wanted to show, or what would have loved to do, is run through these notebooks, right? So this is the SQL notebook experience in Azure Data Studio, and unfortunately I can now change the connection to fire the queries live against the database. The good thing is that we have like the last execution also stored within this. So what you see here is that we would have the need to create a few tables in the database, right? First one to store the routes, then creating a master key for the capability of creating a scoped credential.
Yep.
The scope credential is needed because what we want to do is we want to use a shared access signature in order to have or access a blob storage, which is not a blob storage that we own, but that is the blob storage which provides the route data, right? So we then create the database scope credential, and then with it, we can access this external data source in a blob store, right? That is provided under Azure SQL Workshop, which holds the data. From there, we will then bring in the data into the table. And after that, we will then have data in and one route which has Education Hill in it, right? After that, we create a few more tables, which is a monitored routes table. So do route monitoring. Then we set up the geofence that we want to monitor. And
with all of the text that's in there, it's not great how you can actually comment things out. It's more like a document than a SQL script, right?
And that's also the reason why I'm not too worried that people can't follow along, because this is anyway what you hopefully do after the live session, right? Go and try it out yourself, and then you can run through all the steps. You have good explanation, like a readable document containing the queries that you can fire up live against your Azure SQL database. Exactly. In order to make those things work, right? Then we can create a few more tables, as I said, and after all, we will end up with like those 6 tables down below.
Yeah,
another thing in a second notebook we would then do is that we would explore a little bit the types of things we mentioned, right? Exploring the JSON support, so making sure that we understand, okay, that is exactly the same layout of JSON that we saw earlier on your slide. And then you can select from it, and you have the geography point capability in order to transform latitude, longitude information on a so-called spatial reference identifier, which is SRID 4326, which means positioning it on the globe, right? The Earth, and then storing it as location.
So it's all within T-SQL. It looks, in this case, like a table as well, and it's basically unpacking and looking into a JSON payload and mapping it back to a geospatial data type.
Absolutely, and we, as you can see here, we then have it in the table, right? This is the location, the 2 points we transformed into it, right? And then if we select from it, we can also, with a toString on that field, we can transform it back to the point representation containing longitude, latitude information, right? Which then enables us to take something like it and also put it onto a pretty nice tool. And what I will do is I will do it once we have also defined our bus stop, right? And that is the bus stop area, so geofence that we want to monitor, right? And having those two together will give us this exact same thing here. So we can open up this tool in order to visualize it. So we can plot a shape, and you can see that this is basically live. And then
OpenStreetMap is free and it's accessible to everyone, and you can use it actually to put a geofence within any sort of map there too. So
and now you see, and now you see the geofence, the polygon, right? The area that we want to monitor, and you see the bus inside. This is the point for the bus, right? Inside the area. So that's cool that we have that, right?
So that'll trigger an alert, or you can actually call an Azure function as soon as it enters that geofence.
And last thing that you will then do if you do it through the notebook is you will, in order to have this a little bit more scalable, you will provide this functionality through stored procedures, right? Now we had ad hoc queries. We want to make sure that you have like functionality available, reusable procedures available in order to do something like add bus data, or also like get monitored bus data, stuff like that. So that is what will be created as well. And I think let's switch back to the last few slides here, and I'll try to catch up with the demo, so we might be able to do the last demo again.
Right? Sounds good. So while Kostja goes through and fixes that up, we'll quickly take a look at the second question that we skipped before, so that he has a chance to actually fix it up, so that we can actually do the last thing with the GitHub Actions as well. So a question for everybody to answer: which service tier or feature in Azure SQL Database will support the scenario where a 12 terabyte database is required? So it actually focuses a little bit as well on the question that was asked earlier in terms of size. Is it hyperscale? Is it serverless? Is it column store indexes? Or is it graph models? So I'll go through these one by one from the bottom up, and we'll see whether or not that is a database service tier, first of all, and whether or not it caters toward what we're talking about. So graph models is a feature where you can actually talk about nodes and edges and try to work out how close something is to something else. LinkedIn uses it predominantly to see who you're related to within from a professional perspective. If you know someone who's related to someone else and you actually get contacts through them. So graph models, not really. That's got nothing to do with the 12 terabyte sizing. Column store indexes, yeah, if I've got a 12 terabyte data set, I'm definitely going to hope that I've got column store, that it's column store indexed, but that's not an Azure database service tier. So yes, I would use it, but probably not in this case being the right answer. Third one is serverless. Well, we said already that serverless is focused more on these workloads that you want to be able to auto pause and auto scale from a vCPU perspective. But it doesn't cater towards 12 terabytes of data. It does have size limitations, which are well below 12 terabytes. So that leaves us with the last one here. Hopefully you all had a chance to answer. And the answer should be, let me check to see if I'm correct, hyperscale. Yes, hyperscale is the answer. And so from the get-go, it is able to scale all the way up to 12 terabytes. How are you going, Kostja?
Still trying to catch up, but maybe let's continue with the slides, because I think we can explain through the slides how we would eventually implement CI/CD for Azure SQL Database.
Sounds good.
And there seems to be an issue with the service, it feels, unfortunately. So don't want to blame Microsoft for it, but it seems that currently the database is probably not available. So I don't know if we will be able to then show the integration, but at least we want to walk through it, right? So and Definitely. Try to do the best we can in order to show you what you should expect to see. When it comes to CI/CD for Azure SQL Database or for databases in general, right? Then typically there's the three things that you see. You either take a desired state approach, where you have a representation of how the database should look like, and then there's tooling which will be able to understand the differences between the desired state you are providing and the current state the database is in, right?
Yep.
It will then create the scripts in order to change the current state into the desired state, right? That is option number one, typically what we would have used today. You can then also have code first migrations. Code first is you will probably build, for example, a class person with specific fields in it, and you have a code representation of it first, right? And then this code will create the data structure needed in your database for you, again through tooling, and then it will basically create the data structures, tables, and columns, and so on, and with the respective data types you need in order to store your objects, right? And last one is manual scripts for step-by-step deployments. This is probably something still very much used from what I see.
Unfortunately, but yeah.
Unfortunately, yes. If you have some type of process, this can also work well, but is, as it says, it's manual, and a developer carefully writes and maintains scripts with an emphasis on carefully. You have to do it carefully in order to make sure that you understand all the different changes you need to apply. And typically, if you have a set of scripts, then you will always have the need to run them one after the other in the correct order, and make sure that you don't forget one, right? So that is something there.
So depending on whichever one of those three that you choose, I guess you're still going to need to find how to deploy those changes, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So
I guess that's where the pipeline tool comes into play in terms of, do you do it using Azure DevOps? Do you use GitHub? Do you use Octopus? What sort of approach do you take? And that
I think,
basically
I think there's different ones, right? We have like the GitHub actions that we wanted to show. Probably will not be able to show live, but I think we switch back to my machine anyway, and then show at least a few things.
Mhm.
But also like Azure DevOps, for example, that is a great tool set, right? And it's come a long way already. So a lot of stuff in there you can really set up not only like your deployment pipelines, but also create an environment for your complete development team, right? Work against your work items, user stories, have all those capabilities in there as well, right? All the project management aspects, distributing work and stuff like that. So I think it's a great tool to look at, but very powerful. A lot of capabilities, something you really need to dig into in order to understand all the details.
So take us through the next section that you were talking about with the GitHub actions, and at least some of the points around Visual Studio.
Exactly. Unfortunately, as I said, we will probably not be able to show it, but we can go back to Visual Studio Code, and I would at least show you what is outlined in the module, and the Learn module, and you can then follow up later. You will find also in this workflows folder, right? So in the .github folder workflows, you will find an Azure SQL Database YAML template. This is the thing that we would have used in order to set up part of the automation. So basically, we would have to rename it, get rid of the template section. And then the other change you need to do here is change the server name to your server name, right? So again, it would have been this server name right here. So you can copy it and put it here. And that's the only change you would have the need to change in this file. And then go through the file and really try to understand what it does. In this case, what it does is, on a push, right? You would change the push, you would push the change towards the repo, right? And then it would kick up this deployment action where it would check out the database, compare the database, understand what you have in this deck pack. Also something that you can look up later yourself, what's in the deck pack. And within the deck pack, for example, we would have seen that there comes another stored procedure you want to add into your database. And so if you can kick off the deployment, then you will basically be able to have an automation which deploys changes to your database, and then you will see those changes to your database in Azure Data Studio connected to your database, right? Unfortunately, this connection doesn't work right now. So let me show you the other components or the other thing you need to go to, and that is in settings, right? In your fork, in settings, you have like
and this is so that you can actually access the database without pushing in clear usernames and passwords, right?
Yeah, correct. You will store a secret here, which basically is the connection string. And in the connection string, obviously, you needed to include your password, right? So you would create a new secret here called Azure SQL connection string, and then use again the connection string you have from your database,
In the portal,
right?
yeah.
So if you go to the database right here, and this is working, right? So it's just not connecting. You will basically copy this connection string, add your password that you choose into it, and then you will paste it basically here into this GitHub secret.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, we had a little bit of an issue here with the service today. I hope that's not too much of a distraction, right?
It's live, right? So that's
that's why it's live, right? Anyway, we wanted to encourage you to go through the module on your own pace anyway, and hopefully be able to answer a few questions here.
That's right.
Again, right? We want to automate updates and have some sort of CI/CD pipeline right from the beginning. So if you go basically to the wrap up of the session today, so the summary, then what we really wanted to emphasize is all those components, Azure SQL Database as a central components, connected with a GitHub repo, basically, where you have your code repository connected from your client tools that you installed, like Visual Studio Code and Azure Data Studio, gives you all the basic fundamental setup for your solution, and to develop and work against adding the additional capabilities when it comes to application layer and front end, user front end and stuff like that, right? So we also hopefully could show some of the interesting database capabilities around beyond relational, having JSON data processed in the database, also have the geospatial capabilities, right?
Accessing
and I think that
updating from an API that's coming from a webhook, yeah.
Connecting it to a more or less static basically file store, right, which gives us the foundational bus route data that we imported into the database. So there's a lot of elements here, and I think it's pretty interesting module. And then, as I said, I mean, not only encouraging you to follow up with doing the module yourself, but also eventually go through the complete learning path. I think it's fun. It's a good demo that Davide and Anna have provided here. And as Charlie said, right, there's more to find when it comes to online and videos.
So speaking of that as well, definitely. So there's much more that you can learn from that perspective. We're still learning as MVPs. And so take a look at the tag there or go to Learn Live. Next week, it's talking about migrating your applications. So definitely, it's the last one in the series. So feel free to attend next week as well. It's going to be really, really good.
I think it's actually in 2 days already, right? But
Oh, is it? Not next week?
it's like the last in this series. So make sure to check that out, even if it's a completely different topic. Totally excited about this post Ignite series. And with that,
that's the one. That's the one right there, right? That's the one that's coming up in a couple of days. Yeah, you're right. 2 days time,
Yeah.
16th of December. So
Okay.
thank you very much. It's been a wonderful experience. SQL Server serverless, Azure SQL DB serverless, sorry, web APIs, Data Studio, GitHub Actions. It's been a lot to talk through, and we've talked through the architecting capability. Thank you very much, Kostja. It's been a pleasure for me as well to be speaking to you all. Connect with us on Twitter and continue going through the Learn modules and go to Learn Live TV.
Yeah, my pleasure,
See you
our
later.
pleasure. Good to see you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.